Welcome to the Versus History Podcast with your hosts, Patrick O'Shaughnessy, Connell Smith, and Elliot Watson.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this episode of the Versus History Podcast. It's me, your host, Patrick O'Shaughnessy, a history chappie. Today, we are absolutely delighted to be joined by Nina de Gramont, who is the author of The Christie Affair. Nina, thank you very much indeed for coming to join us today and tell us all about your brand new book.
Thank you so much for having me, Patrick. I appreciate it.
Oh, the pleasure really is all ours. Please tell us about you and your background and how you came about writing this fantastic new publication. Over to you.
Okay, well, I'm American, as you can probably hear from my voice. I'm a writer. This is my 9th book, my 8th novel, I believe. And I teach creative writing at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington. I first learned, it was 2015, and a friend sent me an article about the 11 days in 1926 when Agatha Christie went missing. And I became very interested in what might have happened and started writing a story about it that I researched and worked on for about 5 years. Before it became the Christie Affair, which is out now.
I suppose you better explain to us then, who was Agatha Christie and why do you think, and many others do as well, that she is so historically significant?
Agatha Christie is a British writer who wrote mostly detective novels, but she also wrote a lot of short stories and a lot of plays and a couple memoirs. I've seen her cited as the best-selling author of all time. Very enduring writer whose books have been adapted to the stage, to movies, just a really beloved character in the English language world.
Okay, Nina, tell us about the book. Is it a work of fiction, non-fiction? Over to you. What sort of book is it? It's history to an extent, obviously, but what sort?
It's based on history, but it's very, very much fiction. It takes these historical facts and sort of template and surrounding facts that we know about Agatha's disappearance, and then just sort of fills in those 11 days in a way that comes purely from my imagination.
Tell us a little bit about her books, if you will. I know it doesn't necessarily pertain to the day she went missing, but just to give us an hors d'oeuvre, tell us about the books she wrote and why they gained so much traction with her readership.
Sure. So she wrote, over 60 novels. They were certainly the highlight of what's considered sort of the golden era of crime fiction in England. A couple of the more famous titles are Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile, and Then There Were None. One of the things I think is really interesting about her is that she became a phenomenon, incredibly best-selling author in England, probably during the late 20s, early 30s, and that popularity endured throughout her life, throughout her career. And she easily could have come up with a formula that she stuck to, but she really clearly wrote to entertain herself, really loved creating interesting characters and different structures and forms, and really stretched herself in a way that is incredibly entertaining, but also very skillful. And I think that's why so many people still enjoy reading her today.
Thank you, Nina. Okay, then, let's get to the crux of the matter then. The new book, The Christie Affair, as far as I'm aware, it focuses on these 11 days where Agatha Christie sort of goes missing. I think she's found in the north of England, in Yorkshire, Harrogate, which is a long way from her home down south. Why did you choose to focus on this episode in particular? And then could you tell us what happened, do we think, during these all-important 11 days?
Agatha Christie, for those who know her personality and her work, the photographs we usually see of her today, she's much older, she's already very accomplished, just somebody who went on to achieve phenomenal success. And cuts a very sort of stalwart, stiff upper lip British figure. And I guess that's the reason these 11 days are so fascinating to me. She was 36 years old at the time. Her mother had died the previous summer. Her husband had been having this affair for about 2 years, and she was aware of it. But like a lot of women at the time, decided the best course of action was to wait it out and let him come to his senses. But instead of coming to his senses, he told her on the morning of December 3rd, 1926, that he wanted a divorce and that he wanted to marry his mistress. And then he went off to spend a weekend with his mistress and some friends of theirs. That night, her car, Agatha Christie's car, was abandoned not far from her home at the lip of a chalk pit. It looked like the car had run off the road. The tires were hanging over the edge of the water. Her fur coat, her suitcase, her driver's license were all left in the back seat, and she was nowhere to be found.
Wow, that's some story. Could you tell us then, how did you go about researching for this book? And what were the biggest challenges that you faced while doing so?
So I decided that instead of doing a lot of research at the beginning, I would write the story that I wanted to tell first. I sort of had the bare bones of the story, and I didn't want to get weighted down with a lot of history that I would feel obligated to put on the page. So the first thing that I did was just sort of go for it and make up a story. And then I guess the challenge came in seeing the supporting information and finding things that I had to change once the book was written. I will say there's such a wealth of really fun ways to research the book. A lot of the period details I got by reading a lot of Agatha Christie's early novels. So little details like the, third-class non-smoking railroad car taken from, trips that I see her characters taking. Preoccupations with the First World War and things like that are very much in her books from that time.
I suppose context is all important here. Could you tell us about the world that Agatha Christie was born into, be it sort of local, regional, or just the international context? Obviously, it was a pretty frenzied period of history. So Agatha Christie, tell us a little around the world, about the world that she found herself in.
Sure. She was born in 1890. Her father, I know that there's an American grandfather. It was the kind of family that had found a lot of wealth, but was coming to the end of its wealth. Her father squandered a lot of the money that her grandfather had made. He died when she was 11. So they sort of kept themselves afloat by letting this beautiful house that they'd inherited and going off to stay. In her autobiography, Agatha Christie calls it society. So while the house was let, she'd be sent to stay with somebody in their wonderful home. So I think that even though she was born into a significant amount of privilege, there's always a precarious sense about their standing and their ability to keep on going and hold on to the properties that meant so much to them.
Thank you, Nina. Okay, a question I love to ask authors. What did you find out about your subject matter, Agatha Christie, that surprised you or perhaps even shocked you the most?
Well, one thing that I really love discovering, especially in the context of this story, is how much her life changed for the better once she got over her husband's leaving her and marrying somebody else. I think it's a great example of somebody experiencing huge upheaval and, what she considered absolute disruptive disaster in her life. But once she had to admit that there was no changing it, no disappearance that would make what was happening not happen, she pulled herself together and became really the brave, accomplished person that she'd go on to be. She traveled on her own on the Orient Express. She met her second husband, who's about 10 years younger than she, as an archaeologist, and went on to go on digs with him in Turkey and Syria and Iraq, and really found her true appreciated calling, not only as an author but as an adventurer.
That's absolutely fascinating. There's a touch of T.E. Lawrence or Lawrence of Arabia about that story.
Yes, yes. You know, she sorry, just as she has one memoir called "Come Tell Me How You Live," which is about traveling and going to digs with her husband, and you can really see, you know, she writes about sleeping in a tent in the Syrian desert, and meeting all these different people and traveling on this precarious bus, and she just comes across as such a good sport and somebody who really loved learning about new cultures and meeting different kinds of people.
A role model for us all in that regard. Thank you, Nina. Okay, then let's say someone buys your book, The Christie Affair, and they want to really immerse themselves in the life of Agatha Christie, where she lived, where she went, the restaurants she frequented, whatever. Could you tell us one or two places that people could potentially go or visit to essentially live some of the life of Agatha Christie, if only for a minute, an hour a day?
Well, the hotel where she was found is still there. At the time when she was found there, and one sort of interesting detail is that she was found at this hotel, the Spa Hotel in Harrogate, registered under the last name of her husband's mistress. And at the time, it was the Harrogate Hotel. Now I believe it's called the Old Swan Hotel. And you can go there and stay there. And I believe the architecture is much the same as it was when she went there. And then the house that she lived in, gosh, you may know better than I, because I researched the time that she lived in Berkshire. But the house she lived when she was older and married to Max Mallowan, her second husband, is preserved. And, you know, you can go visit it and walk through it and all that sort of stuff.
Thank you very much indeed. Okay, so coming to the end, I suppose, a question that many people will be wondering. Obviously, you've got a fantastic American accent, and Agatha Christie lived in the heart of sort of rural England. How does an American academic and scholar like yourself become so interested in a provincial English writer? It's a great advert for globalization.
Yes, I think she's universally fascinating. And again, you know, my entry into my exploration of her and creating a fictional character based on her was thinking about this extraordinarily vulnerable time in her life, which we've all had extraordinarily vulnerable times in our lives. Most of us are lucky enough to not have them become global headlines. So it was really that interested me first. And I also was fascinated by the fact that somebody who, you know, the job of a mystery writer is to present and create this mystery that is solved by the end of the story. But Agatha Christie, this was the one mystery she wouldn't solve for us. She never spoke about how exactly she got to that hotel in Harrogate, and didn't like to discuss that time in those 11 days.
Everyone's entitled to some secrets here, there, and
absolutely.
Agatha Christie took those to the grave. Okay, tell us about your book. Where can we get it? And I don't want you to become a salesperson and tell us why we should buy it, but if we do buy it, just give us a little snapshot of the drama and intrigue that we can find in there. So where can we get it? Who's it published by? And all those sort of details, and give us a little snapshot of what we'll find within both covers. Go.
Okay, so in the United States, it's published by St. Martin's Press, and you can get it as of February 1st. It will be available through all U.S. outlets, fine bookstores, online, bookshop, Amazon. The publication date in the UK was January 20th, and it's published by Mantle, which is an imprint of Pam Macmillan, and then it should be available in Canada, in Ireland, in India, and Australia through Pam Macmillan Global. And again, online bookstores, local bookshops, everywhere books are sold, I hope.
Absolutely. And the big A with a M and A, Z and O and N, I'm sure sell it as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, look, it's out there already if you're lucky enough to be in the UK. So go and grab yourself a copy. Nina, I mean, there may be people out there who want to get in contact with you, are fascinated by it, want to discuss the book, or want to enter into some academic debate, whatever. Are you on social media, any of the platforms that people can say hi?
Yes, I'm on Twitter and Instagram.
There you go, folks.
I'm doing my best to respond to everybody. So fire away.
That's fantastic. I've not had a chance to read the book yet, but I have some family coming out to visit me in the very, very near future, and they're going to bring me a copy, so I cannot wait to get stuck into the Christie Affair. And I bring it in hardback as well, which is always lovely because it lasts forever. So thank you very much indeed for, well, number one, writing the book and celebrating and showcasing and platforming this important history, and number two, putting it out there for us all to enjoy, and then coming on to share your experiences on the Versus History podcast. And we really support everything that you're doing, and just all the very, very best to you, Nina, with the book. It sounds absolutely fantastic, and I have no doubt that's going to be the case when I read it through in a couple of weeks' time.
Thank you so much, Patrick. All the best to you too.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the Versus History podcast. Visit us at www.versushistory.com and follow us at Versus History on Twitter and Instagram. You can download all episodes from iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or from wherever you get your podcasts.